Dallas Committee on Natural Resource Tourism will come to order. Would the clerk please take attendance?
Chair Martin.
Here.
Representative St. Germain.
Here.
VanderWall.
Present.
Outman.
Here.
Hoadley. Johnson.
Here.
Preston.
Here.
Bonak.
Here.
Fairbairn.
Here.
Wertz.
Here.
McFall.
Here.
Scott. Weiss.
Here.
Arbit. Foreman.
Here.
Myers Phillips. Wooden.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you do have a quorum.
And thank you. And Representative VanderWall makes a motion to approve the minutes for a previous meeting. The minutes are approved by unanimous consent. We're now going to take up House Bill 5093, which, since it's the only thing on the docket, I'm sure that's why everybody's here. Sponsored by Representative VanderWall. Representative, you can give an overview of your bill. And I'm not going to hold the sponsors to a real strict time limit. I do encourage you to be as brief and not repeat. We have several things to get through, and I have some things to get to also, so appreciate it. Thank you.
You know, I got to put my glasses on or I would stumble through this. But thank you, Chair Martin and members of the committee, for giving me the opportunity just to chat a little bit about House Bill 5093. This legislation represents one of the most important steps that we can take to secure a long-term health and sustainability of Michigan's fisheries. For years, our fisheries have been underfunded. Biologists, conservation groups, and anglers across the state have warned the stagnant funding is putting real strain on the fish population, habitat quality, and the future of the sport itself. House Bill 5093 directly addresses this problem by creating a stable, dedicated funding model, one that ensures our fisheries are protected not just for today's anglers, but for the future generations. This bill directs license revenue straight to the fisheries rather than allowing those dollars to be absorbed into broader DNR budget. This guarantees that the money anglers contribute is used to work they care about the most: stocking, habitat restoration, invasive species control, maintaining access sites. The creation of Fishery Oversight Commission adds an additional layer of transparency and accountability, ensuring every dollar is used efficiently and for its intended purpose. The modest $3 license increase fee simply reflects inflation and rising management costs. This is not a new tax or a major fee hike. It's long overdue adjustment. The last significant fee increase was over 25 years ago. And since then, the cost of running hatcheries, conducting surveys, managing habitat, and have continued to climb while funding has remained flat. Without action, that gap will only widen. The bill also modernizes the terminology by replacing the all species license with a clearer term, general fishing license, with no change in cost or privileges. It introduces a $5 hatchery stamp, required only for anglers targeting species directly stocked by the DNR, such as salmon, walleye, lake trout. This ensures that those who benefit most from hatchery operations help support the cost of producing and maintaining those fisheries. House Bill 5093 also makes adjustments to discounts and youth licensing in a way that keeps fishing accessible while still supporting sustainability. The senior discount will gradually shift from roughly 60% to 20% over the 4 years, aligning it more closely with the other outdoor recreation programs. And a new $5 youth license required for children under 13 fishing the Great Lakes and for ages 13 to 16 statewide. Help introduce young anglers to the responsibility of supporting the resource they enjoy. Importantly, this bill is not being pushed by government alone. It's backed by sportsmen, conservationists, charter captains, and more than dozens of outdoor clubs across Michigan. These are people who spend the most time on the water, who see the challenges firsthand and who understand that sustainability funding is essential if we want strong fisheries for today and tomorrow. Chair Martin and members of this committee, House Bill 5093 is a practical, responsible, and a forward-looking solution. It creates the stable funding our fisheries desperately need, ensures transparency in how those dollars are used, and positions Michigan to maintain a healthy, thriving fish populations for decades to come. I respectfully urge support for this bill that will continue to make Michigan the premier state to enjoy the great outdoors with a fishery unmatched by any other state in our nation. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
I appreciate that presentation by the representative on Lake Michigan. You mentioned creating oversight, and you used the word commission.
Well, a committee, commission, we can
Is that
label
internally?
that.
Is that internally or by legislation?
Pardon?
Is that internally or by legislation?
That'd be by through this legislation, yeah, internally that we would create that.
I do parse the word committee and commission because throughout the bill it'll mention the commission, and I can only assume because it's not in this particular portion that it refers back to the Natural Resource Commission.
No, that is not correct. It would be a whole
Yeah, but there's several
separate
times in the
group.
bill what occurs now before amendments.
Okay.
It refers back to the commission.
Okay.
But and so I don't want that confusion there for one.
Okay, very good point.
And just the 5093 portion, it doesn't define commission. It just says to the commission. It doesn't go back and say Natural Resource Commission.
Point
known
taken.
as the commission. It doesn't say that in here.
Okay.
So that's the one question I had there. Representative Outman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative VanderWall, for testifying on your bill. Just a quick question about license revenue breakdown currently. Can you explain what is the current breakdown of where a fishing license dollar goes today? Like what percentage directly goes to funds fishery versus other, other DNR functions?
The experts that are going to come are going to tell you, I can give you a rough estimate that about 75% was supposed to come back from fishing license into the fisheries. That's dropped considerably over the last umpteen years, and we're down into the mid 60 range, 60, I'm going to guess 64%. It may be just a little bit, don't hold me right to that, but we're sitting at basically 60% of a dollar spent goes back to the fishery now, and the other gets absorbed into wildlife and other things.
And then just one really quick question. I was surprised to see pike on that list of species that are going to require that $5 hatchery stamp. And that's because the DNR actively stocks pike.
If we're actively producing in a hatchery and planting fish, that would be the only one
Okay.
that are targeted, those species.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe the DNR can be prepared to answer that when they get up here because this last year we didn't. I have nothing that shows any pike being introduced, and over the last 10 years, the percentage compared to everything else we raise is extremely small. And we're talking about inland waterways, and I want to make sure that a great blue heron doesn't drop some pike in someplace in Grandpa's Pond, and all of a sudden we have a violation somewhere on private property of no less. Just want to make sure things are clear because we want to encourage people to get out there and learn to fish and enjoy the sport.
Absolutely.
Representative Weiss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for your testimony, Representative. I just had a quick question. The bill, as I read it, is tie barred to a bill request, so we're not able to look up the bill, what bill it is. And I was just wondering if you could give any more information of what that bill is.
I guess I'm going to have to sit back and say I'm going to have to look into that. I didn't believe it was tie barred to anything else, so
Okay.
That might have been a misprint or something. I'll look into that, though.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep.
And I do have, you can see this is a big deal. My notes show that 24,000 pike from all sources, tribal, federal, and so forth, only 24,000 have been stocked. So it's a very, very small portion compared to some other species on pike. So I don't know what the cost could be absorbed. We'll have to get answers. Representative Hoadley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative VanderWall, for bringing this forward. I think this is very important. As I've said in a lot of conversations, that the Fisheries Department within the DNR is maybe one of the segments that has done the greatest benefit with the least amount of funding. So I like the intent of the bill. I am concerned a little bit with some of the language there, the step down of the funding that goes directly to fisheries, and directly tied to that would be the fisheries director having the ability to create that oversight within itself, and again removing that oversight from the legislature is a little bit maybe concerning with that. But if you could touch back on to why the breakdown, or I should say the reduction of going from 100% to 80% funding, and then that also being, at discretion afterwards. If this is the intent to get more funding to fisheries, wouldn't we want to put the guardrails in there to make sure that it does that over a long duration?
Well, I believe that would be great, and it would be our intent to do that. I think that we're also being cognizant of everything else that goes into it. But ultimately, for all of us that live up north, and for seeing what it does in lines of bringing in dollars to the economy, and for those that are in the southern part the same way, we want to make sure that this fishery is protected and it grows. And the more dollars we can put into that system is going to make it better, and of course, in the long term, make it stronger. And like I said, we've got one of the best fisheries now, so that's something that we would love to chat about. If that's what this group would like to see us do and recommend, we're all ears to hearing that.
Yeah, glad to hear that, because again, I can't stress enough that we want to, if we're going to create this revenue source, we want to make sure that it's directed to, right now we've got a hardworking fisheries director, and what's that look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and someone that might not have the best interest of the fisheries at stake having the ability to change that is a little bit concerning.
Yeah, and you know what, Representative, I think that that's something that we worked on, and I know it's in our intent. And when I say our, I'm only as good as the folks that I've worked on, correct? We want to make sure that we do have, the legislative body has that opportunity to make the decisions, and we're not bypassed through this oversight group that's going to look and make sure and give us recommendations. I thought it was pretty clear in there, but you know how it happens when you get absorbed into a bill, that's why we have committee meetings, right? Because sometimes you get so self-absorbed in there, we forget what's outside the horse miners, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, I understand. A follow-up, if I may, on a separate question is also the reduction in the senior fishing license over the next 4 years, going from 80 to 20% of the retail price.
I think that's, I go back in a little bit of history, and it was before any of us that are serving right now were here. We made some decisions to implement some licensing increases back in 2014. And during the deal we made was to cut some licensing for the senior, with the general fund making up that reduction. Well, of course, I think every one of us here understands there's never a dollar that's going to come from the general fund because there's no money left at the end of the year. So we have really cheated the fisheries. And what we want to do is we don't want to abruptly make that change. We want to slow walk that back a little bit, get it comparable to the wildlife side, and allow our seniors to still enjoy that discount, but not as steep as it is depending on the general fund to make that difference up, because that's just not going to happen.
So fixing a past mistake.
Correct.
Right. Okay. And that was my concern with the ambiguous language in some of those other areas, to make sure we're not making mistakes today. So I'm happy to hear that you're willing to work through some of these details and make sure that, your intent of this bill is what's applied at the end of the day if we can get this thing passed. Thank you.
Yeah, and you look at the cost, if you go to a hatchery and you realize the scope of things, you walk through and see the tank full of invasive species, non-native species, excuse me, you get a scope of the energy that needs to be used, and I'm hoping the DNR gives us some costs on the food prices too, and things like that. So good stuff, and I think it's well worth that. Representative Preston.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with previous representatives' comments. Some of the things I agree with the intent of this bill as far as increasing fisheries. I tip my hat to Director Claremont, doing an excellent job. I think this is one area where the light shines bright on work product and what we get out of this. But I was a retailer in 2014. I was selling licenses when that change took place. I saw what happened. I do have some serious reservations and concerns that I'm hoping that you'll work with me on regarding the imposition of a license for the youth. I think that's a gateway. I think we're going to be making criminals out of kids that don't even realize they need a license. And I think it's going to be hard to message. And I'm not a big supporter of expanding that, as well as the decrease on the seniors. Our seniors are living in a fixed income lifestyle. If anybody deserves a break, they do. In testimony in the last term, it was described to me by the DNR that the seniors represent a disproportionate use of the resource. I'm sorry. That's the bed we made in 2014, and that's what we should stick with. I don't believe in changing the rules halfway through. Everything else, though, I'd like to see more of it go towards fisheries as much as we can, just to backfill them, and less going into the DNR general. And I just hope that there's a willingness to work with me on that, because I believe that there's a place for this in fisheries to make them better, stronger, more adept and flexible to the public. But some of these issues I'd like to be able to work with you with.
Yeah, and you know what? And we never shut the door on anything. I think everybody that sits in this room understands that we want to work to get to the right decision for the long-term good of our fishery. I think it's very important to look that, we made mistakes, and I understand that sometimes we do deals behind the door to get things done that sound really good, but then we need to make up those dollars that should really be going to a fishery. It's been 1997. We're in 2026, man, and you know what? We've got to look at what we're going to do to make sure that, our children have an opportunity to use this great resource, your grandchildren that you hope you have and I have. These are the things, and I think we need to be careful a little bit. We're not changing, the youth situation on the inlet. We're really truly working on, when we're looking at the big lake, and I think those things can be explained to the youth immediately when they get on the boat with grandpa or their dad or their mom. And we're teaching them, when they're reeling in that 15-pound king, how important that is and how much fun they have and what that'll do. But I am absolutely willing to work with each and every one of you to make sure that we sustain this great sport for everybody to take advantage of. But it takes maintenance, and we need to do it. And I am proud that, we've been able to work hard with the group. We've had a lot over the year working on this bill. We've had a lot of hard discussions. And we work closely with the DNR and, and the fisheries, and we're excited of where we can go. And whatever it takes, we need to make something happen so we sustain this in the long term. So I look forward to working with you, Representative, and we're excited about it.
Just off the cuff, this is kind of a learning experience. Making a deal from the general fund to make things up, which never, ever happens, and it'll happen in a lame duck type session. We now have 6 potential terms as legislators in the House. You can't just, on your 3rd term, make a promise that you won't be here to hold. Those things have to be really, really considered from now on. I just want to,
Thank you.
off the cuff, make that comment. Representative Warts.
Thank you, Chair. So, just a couple of questions. So, before January 1st, you're saying 2029, 100% of the fees collected, it is going to go to fisheries
All
up until,
correct.
okay, and then the step down from there, $28 after that, and so on and so forth. Okay. When you say go to fisheries, so will it be for hatcheries and also for prevention of invasive species?
100%. Anything to deal with fishing.
Okay, so we would maybe be working to eliminate Asian carp and other,
Well, I think the fisheries are always involved with that and currently are. Of course, some of that's federal and some of that's not. When we continue to work on that, I'll let the experts from the department chat a little bit further on that. I don't want to get into dictating everything because they know better exactly the breakdown, but this money will stay in the fisheries side of things from the licensed dollars that are generated.
okay, and then my last question is, what are licensing fees in neighboring states, for example, Wisconsin and Ohio?
You know what? I don't have that sheet in front of me, but this is very, very comparable, and I know that the group that's coming up to speak behind me will be able to address that.
And do we have some sort of a compact? This may sound like a dumb question, but I'm not a fishery person. I don't know what the
Well,
correct word is. But if someone's fishing on Lake Michigan and they're a Wisconsin resident, as long as you have a Wisconsin license or a Michigan license, are you?
Middle of the lake, there's a fence. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Basically the middle of the lake.
Well, there is on Google Maps. There's
Yes,
a line.
and where that line is, technically, you're under jurisdiction of the state that
And
you're.
that's one of the reasons we have the 24-hour license.
Okay, so if
Fish that day.
you crossed over into Wisconsin.
Would have to have a Wisconsin license.
Okay.
Or
that's-
Canada.
Okay, or Ohio and Lake Erie. Okay. Thank you.
Representative McFall.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to touch on the other part of the name of this committee, the tourism part. And I don't know if this is a question for you, but do we have some sort of idea, like the impact, because you said that it's dropped down to 60-something%, that's had on tourism?
I don't know the number. I know that the next group's going to come up and they're going to tell you what we generate.
Okay.
And it's billions of dollars currently, which would be there's many of us here that are along the lake shore, and even inland. When I represented, Misaki and Wexford, to see the bait shops, see everything that's contributed around it is huge dollars that are coming into those communities because of our inland lakes and the Great Lakes. But it is so important because you know what? It is the deal where dad can sit on the edge of the riverbank with his daughter and cast something in, or the lake and cast in and catch a bluegill. I mean, these are all important things, and we need to make sure we sustain that long term.
Yeah,
That's
agreed.
what we're working on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. I know more of these questions are going to be detailed in the next presentation.
Yep.
So I appreciate the overview, a little more detailed overview. So just in the interest of time.
Yes, sir.
The next one
Thank
is going to
you.
be very detailed.
Yes, it
If
is.
it's already been covered, if we can try to, gloss over those in the presentation because there's a picture or something that's already been covered, and get some of the meat that the next presenters have. So we'll hear now from Mark Williams, the founder and executive director of Michigan Anglers Consortium, Brian Burrows, the executive director for Michigan Trout Unlimited, and Ed Blizik from president of the Great Lakes Salmon Initiative. So as I said, the questions have come up, so prepared to what they were. If you hit those points on your slide presentation and move it right along, it'd be greatly not appreciated because we want your information. But if we've already heard it, then you can just emphasize it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chair. Honorable legislatures, anglers, and valued stakeholders, I come before you today to address this critical importance of House Bill 5093, a solutions crafted and championed and funded by Michigan's anglers community. The legislation represents a decisive step towards ensuring the vitality and sustainability of this treasured world-class sport fishery and industry deeply woven into the fabric of our state's heritage. We just talked about tourism. It's a $4 billion tourism industry that this sport fishery supports. Very, very important to all of us there. The success of the sport fishery was built on our hatcheries. Saginaw Bay, Lake Erie came to life because of our hatcheries. Lake Michigan, because of the invasive species of alewives, was by Howard Tanner coming up and introducing the salmon. And that's a world-class freshwater salmon fishery, the only one that I know of in the world that's in the Great Lakes, let alone the United States. So that was a nice, happy accident that created tourism. A little bipartisan there was the fact that a salmon angler that comes to town spends $1,000 when they come to town for a salmon trip. A walleye angler is over $250 when they come to town. So the success of the sport fishery is inseparable from the dedicated work of our state hatcheries. The hatcheries have served as the backbone of Michigan's sport fishery, providing healthy populations of trout, salmon, and walleye, and other prized species, and sustained recreational angling ecological balances. These facilities not only produce fish for stocking, but also drive research, innovation, and conservation efforts that protect aquatic habitats and ensure long-term resource stewardships. In the 1930s, Michigan operated 16 hatcheries, laying the groundwork for these thriving walleye populations on Saginaw Bay and Lake Erie. And today, they remain synonymous with our world-class fishery. Unfortunately, we're now down to 6 hatcheries. That's quite a difference from the 16 that we used to have. These challenges are because of stagnant funding. Despite the undeniable value of our fisheries, the funding mechanisms that they support, they have remained stagnant since 1997, as Representative VanderWall has stated. The 2014 license adjustment intended to address financial shortfalls ultimately resulted in reduced funding for fisheries management. Meanwhile, these hatcheries' infrastructures has dwindled. Maintenance and just overall workload has caused them to deteriorate. House Bill 5093 is the direct result of a collaboration and innovation within Michigan's angling community. Angler developed, driven, and funded, it offers a responsible, forward-looking framework to oversee fisheries, address persistent funding challenges, and ensure that these sport fisheries remain vibrant and resilient. The legislation ensures that funding dollars go to fisheries-dedicated projects, all projects for fisheries, not just into a wildlife, game, and fish fund. They're going to have guardrails to maximize the impact of every contribution, guaranteed that funds are used where anglers and resource managers need them most. The number one thing we were told when we were talking to folks about this was, I want to know that when I buy a license, that my dollars goes for fisheries. I want to know that my license goes to fisheries, and that's what these guardrails are going to set up. So by supporting this legislation, you position the group to resolve a generational challenge and establish a legacy of stewardship, leadership, and partnership with those who cherish Michigan's natural resources. It's not just only designed, support, and financed by these anglers, but also ensures the oversight by those who are most attuned to the needs of our fisheries, the anglers. When we were designing this and coming up with this, we were told, how come you guys haven't spoke up yet? Where were you before? Well, we're here now, and we want to stay here. Chair, you asked the question, is this a commission? Are we going to have to, make decisions of that? No, we're here to you are going to give us responsibility that we can go ahead and then give you information and report. We're not going to govern, we're not going to sit there, but we're going to give you information so that we can say, yes, this is what our DNR is doing, and it's more of a responsibility and an oversight committee, which of course is needed these days. So we sit there and we say, let us seize this moment to affirm our commitment to Michigan anglers, communities, and natural heritage in an era where accountability, transparency are at the forefront of every governmental discussion and decision. Let's provide precisely what everyone involved wants with House Bill 5093. With that being said, together we can ensure Michigan truly stands as the Great Lakes state for this world-class sport fishery, a source of pride, prosperity, and opportunity for generations to come. So this securing Michigan's world-class fishery, this is a unified vision. Over 15,000 anglers have been engaged. I want you to know that we have signed on support of over 118 angling groups, businesses, tourism bureaus, and such across the state of Michigan. And yes, the UP as well. It's unified. Yes, we know there's challenges, but we have inland operators, we have charter boats, we have weekend warriors, we have everybody. And that's how the Fisheries Oversight Committee was developed. When I started this and went forward with it, I said I have to make sure that we talk to everybody. We have to make sure we talk to people down in Lake Erie. We have to make sure we talk to the inland people, the guys sitting on the pond. And yes, even the youth. We make sure that we talk to youth and talk to some schools and said what would they think. And believe it or not, retention of youth is greater when you have a youth license. And that's why we developed the youth tag. So we want to make sure that we have a great economic impact, which we have talked about. But this is important to see here on this slide. Our unique customers that we have is hovering right around 1.1 million anglers. That's what we're basically having. It's been steady for quite some time now, from 2018 to 2014. We are number 7 in the U.S. for number of angler licenses and number 5 in U.S. anglers for related expenditures and economic outputs. Again, this is a $4 billion economic impact to Michigan. If you want to see what it does, when the Alewife crashed over in Lake Huron, take a look what happened to all those towns over there that used to rely on salmon fishermen to come up and fish. Thank God the areas around Saginaw Bay had walleye to fall back on. So the challenges are stagnant funding. Even though we have nice steady recruitment and we're not losing like hunting and other areas are losing, we have stagnant funding. And the reason for those things, like you guys have spoken on, was back in 2014 when we unfortunately said we will rely on general fund money to backfill a discount. We know that doesn't work, like the chair acknowledged, and I appreciate that. With that being said, this is where we came up with the ideas to put some guidelines and some guardrails on it with 5093. So we can make sure that we can rebuild these hatcheries, put the maintenance to them, and have the fish production that we need. So the purpose of 5093 was to make sure that the framework and everything will be there for generations to come to promote the sustainability. We don't want to come back before you and keep asking the questions over and over again. Can we have an increase? Can we do this? No, that doesn't work. You guys are too busy. We need to make this done once and make sure that it's done right. We got to restore the trust with anglers and everybody. Want to make sure that we know that when this money goes to fisheries, it's for fisheries. Fisheries is the one and only that I'm aware of. I think deer are the only other ones that goes into the general fund. 100% of the funds from a deer license goes into the fish and game fund. And then it gets allocated and appropriated out of there. And you're going to see here shortly that it's the fact of stagnation that's the problem. So we have to make sure that we have the correct policy. And once everybody looks at the policy of 5093, they say that, hey, this is good policy. And is there work to be done? Probably. Like Representative VanderWall said, there's things that we need to work on maybe because you get down in the weeds and you get blinders on it. But we definitely want to work with folks on this. So let's look at the keys here. And this is a great graph in my point. We look back in 2012, 78% of fishing revenue went to, or license revenue went to fisheries. Now we look here in 2024, 69% of the revenue goes to fisheries. Well, there's a problem here. In 2014, if you look at the big jump in revenue. There's a big jump there that went. We jumped revenue by over $6 million, but allocation didn't jump. And allocation stays stagnant. You look through the whole thing, it stays stagnant. Even during COVID, when there was a big jump, it stays stagnant. You see through the whole entire thing, we're stagnant. And this is where it comes into play. And now we put that on top of the fact that we are not getting the backfill from the senior license. That ends up creating what we're calling a deficit. But of course, the DNR is not going to operate in a deficit. They don't do that work. They do good business. And Chief Claremont makes sure that they don't do that. And he's done a really good job of making sure that he does everything that he can with the money he gets, which is pretty impressive. So when we look at that, we said, how are we going to create this? So we put the guardrails on this. And I know Representative Hoadley asked about this in regards to the 100% funding. The reason why we went with 100% funding is said with 100% funding, less the cost of doing business. Now I know this is a dangerous term to say less the cost of doing business, but we understand that we have to pay for some things, i.e. license costs. We're going to have to pay for LED that's working hard out there to make sure that the law enforcement is done for fisheries and things of that nature. But what we don't want is our license fees going into that fund and then going and paying for hunting, going for against Hunters Against Hunger. I know everybody up at this table right now also hunt. You know what? I'll be happy to contribute to that fund through my hunting license or in other arenas. But we want our fisheries dollars to go for fisheries. With the model that we have, we know that 100% going to fisheries, less the cost of doing business, in a 5-year scenario will recover what we should have gotten back in 2014. Then we can go ahead and we can step it down to 80%. And the reason 80% is there is if we go back to 2012 and have that 78%, that was pretty good funding for the DNR at that point in time. But if we do 80% that they are receiving, and yes, we had it to where the fisheries chief could do it because we don't know what they're going to need for those things, but these are things to be discussed and have these things go forward. Yes, do there need to be guidelines? Most definitely, and we have to make sure those are there. But this way, we put a floor on it. We're not going to have to worry about it going down to mid-60s or anything of that thing. We've got guidelines here, and that's the whole idea behind 5093. We are putting guidelines on there. And then every 3 years, there's going to be a review. And that review is not just done by the legislature, but it's going to be done by the fisheries oversight. So that way you will hear stakeholder input. Because you always hear from your constituents when they want to complain and they want to cry about something. But won't it be nice for you to have a constituent group that's going to sit there and say, hey guys, we think this is good, this is what's going on, and report directly to you guys with information? That's what the whole design of the fisheries oversight is about. The hatchery stamp. I'm going to give big kudos to my colleague here, Ed Blissick, with the Great Lakes Salmon Initiative. Actually, he was in Representative Martin's office. He was telling me he was all excited because this is an angler-driven thing as well. That was tremendous angler support. He was sitting there, he was trying to find a way because how do we get more revenue coming to fisheries? And this was a way of doing it, was to be able to maybe get more rods to be able to run, buy a ticket to be able to run more rods and things of that nature. And I told Ed, I said, Ed, this is a great economic impact. It will help immensely. And if we go ahead, why don't we team up and we can work this into our bill? And Ed has been a great resource on this. It is huge, huge economic impact and support. That $5 hatchery stamp will help these hatcheries immensely. The fact of it is that you are going to immediately get something. We can tell fishermen, oh, we're going to stock more fish. We're going to be able to plant more fish. We're going to be able to do hatchery maintenance. They can't see that. But what they can see is that they're going to be able to run more rods. And the DNR has told us that they are neutral on being able to run more rods. It doesn't have an impact on catching fish because the most inefficient way to catch a fish is by hook and line. So you all of a sudden you give them the $5 for the hatcheries and they immediately get to be able to run more rods. Then we go to the youth fishing licenses. And I know this is a tough one here, but the youth fishing license is to capture Dingell-Johnson dollars. And the thing is with youth licenses, they have it in Canada and they utilize that because of retention. When we have it currently where there's a $2 volunteer license that very rarely gets used. But if we go ahead with a $5 youth license, then that will help us to retain youth. And by retaining those youth when they have that $5 license, it really helps. But we definitely are open for discussion. And then we have in our box a tool called the COLA Rider. It's just in there as a guideline so that if we come across a point where we would have to do any increases, it's already in the bill. We don't have to worry about it, and it's going to have guidelines on it to where we can make sure that it doesn't get overused. So we're going to put it as a tool in a toolbox. It's not just automatic. So we're trying to set things up so we don't have to come before you again. The Dingell-Johnson dollars, we want to make sure that everybody understands those. Those are from the federal excise tax. The federal excise tax that everybody pays on sporting goods. Basically, it is based off of number of angler recruitment or angler licenses purchased. So for every license that is sold, then it's then transformed into a ratio on the size of the state and such. So we can get more licenses sold, you get more Dingell-Johnson dollars. We get to keep more of those federal excise tax dollars in the state of Michigan. And that increases, obviously, our revenue. Oversight and transparency. The model that we are looking at is used around different states, Minnesota, Wisconsin, New York, and they have these different funding models with oversight. I know personally that Minnesota uses a sales tax model, but they also have a Fisheries Oversight Committee, and a Hunting Oversight Committee, and a Budget Oversight Committee. And that's where I looked at this, because we need to have the oversight so we can have dedicated funding streams, and then we can look at it and then help you guys so that everything stays on track, so that somebody doesn't say, well, geez, how come the senior license has never been backfilled, when we knew that it never would be able to. The committee's going to be made up of anglers. Anglers are the ones that know what's going on out there. We're out there every day, we're seeing what's happening, and then we can go ahead and say, yes, this is what needs to be done, this is what's happening. We can see the invasives and how they're happening and how they're taking care of things. It's going to be mandated by the legislation, but it's only going to be with responsibility. We're going to have no governance power or any oversight as far as being able to make decisions that are going to be lawful. But we can come to you. We're going to be able to stay on top of things so things don't slip away. We're going to be able to help with policy development and active monitoring, so that way then we will be able to report to you guys, if not just on a quarterly basis, but when things pop up, and be more hand-in-hand in a partnership with the DNR. Chief Claremont has done a great job with working with us and being transparent and giving us information we've asked, and we want to continue that great relationship. The political safeguards. The reason we don't want to get into that is because we don't want this driven by politics. We want it to be open to the fish. This is about the fish and for our great resource. And that is why we want the direct deposit into a fisheries sub-account and not get it commingled. We want to make sure that there's no redirection of funds, and we want to make sure that that hatchery stamp is going to go for the fish production. We want to make sure that it's only for fish production and nothing else. Now that's ponds, whatever else that we may need. Projects to be funded. The first thing and foremost is going to be for those hatcheries, the maintenance and the working of those different things that need to be fixed. We're going to want it for the cormorant control, avian protection that we have, because they are destroying our habitat, things of that nature. And then boots on the ground. We need biologists. We need fisheries biologists. Here's the biggest problem that we have. Right now in Michigan, we ask one of our fisheries biologists, one biologist, to oversee 500,000 acres of water. The national average is one biologist to see 12,000 acres. That's ridiculous. So we will make sure that this extra funding that we're getting is going for boots on the ground and not for administrative purposes. Of course, it's going to the fish production and making sure that we take care of what needs to be done and make sure that we bring our world-class fishery up to par. This is our list that I think every one of you has. I think it's pretty impressive. And yes, we included the 906. Representative Bonack, it's nice to finally see you here. I went to Michigan Tech, and I watched you on the news there to see when I could actually travel and get home during the breaks. So we went all the way to the Keweenaw Peninsula. We have several visitors and tourist bureaus, and we have several folks here in the gallery here today that made it despite the weather. But it's pretty impressive when you look at it that it's not just economic, or not just fishing groups and fishing clubs, but economic groups, manufacturing groups, and else, and everything. I mean, there's a body shop on here, there's a barber shop on here, and you say, well, why are they there? Well, guess what? They believe in this as well, and they signed on to this. So it's very, very important to see that over 118 organizations and clubs and members say that 5093 has good policy and is there. And yes, is there work? Does it solve all of the DNR's problem? No. But we know this, that it will solve fisheries, and we know that there's work to be done, and we are definitely open to listening for that, because we know that 5093 will secure Michigan's fisheries legacy. And we just look forward to working with you and making you the legislature that solved Michigan's fishing funding problem for legacy and for generations to come. So thank you all, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you. I want to just make sure it's emphasized that more rods in the water does not equal more limit. It's the same limits, it's just more rods in the water. So I just want to make sure that that's clear for everybody. And I'm glad you have, even though you talk about COLA, and I'm not the biggest fan of using that solely, so you don't have it as solely, because there's no science behind just adjusting everything by CPI. Use the hatcheries, for example. Things are expensive, but it's because maybe the food went up. They have saved money because they've gone with solar, LEDs, things like that have saved money. So technology in the future is not just based on the consumer's price index. We need to know the actual factors that are causing the increases. Representative Altman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here today to testify. I see you ended your presentation with a highlight of all the businesses and individuals that are supporting this legislation. I have had some support as well from constituents, but I've also had a number of people reach out in opposition. And I think part of the problem is a lot of residents don't understand the role that fisheries and the stocking of fish play in our angling activities. Could you just briefly and succinctly just paint a picture for my constituents of what would Michigan look like without a robust fishery division in the state of Michigan?
Well, thank you for that information, because we do get pushback, but I can tell you this, once we sit down and have a conversation with them, the pushback ends with, oh, well, as long as the dollars go to fisheries, I'm okay with that. But I will tell you this, when you look at a $4 billion industry, just go over to Harbor Beach, go over to Lexington, go over to Rockport, go to any of those communities where the alewives crashed, and they don't have the bait shops, they don't have the party stores, they don't have the restaurants there anymore because they don't have the fishery there anymore. Now, it's starting to come back because of the work of the fisheries division, but we're looking at losing a $4 billion industry, and that's really tough when you look at it. I know Ludington lost it when they had BKD and stuff. That wasn't any fault of the DNR, but it can happen, and you're looking at losing $4 billion for a very minute thing. The cheapest thing when it comes to fishing is your fishing license.
Yeah. But aside from economic activity and the economic impact, what does it look like for anglers out there fishing? Is there, I'm certainly sure there is an impact there, but can you just touch on that real briefly?
Right.
Yeah, so when I think about fisheries impact in Michigan, I split into two buckets. One is, as an angler, it's part of my quality of life. I moved here 25 years ago and chose not to go back to my home because of the fisheries were incredible here, and I'm a fish guy. So for us, quality of life side of it, it's a part of our identity of living in Michigan. It's right. It's when I have a bad week, it's what I'm thinking about, piling through that so I can get to the weekend to go do something like that. And in reality, when our fisheries aren't getting what they need, they're not managed to their optimum, it means everybody's frankly more disappointed, right? Not completely. It's nuanced, right? A lot of the reasons we go fishing don't have anything to do with what we catch. So I'm not saying that fishing won't be, therapeutic, but it just means all of our fisheries aren't quite as good as they're clearly capable of being. On the economic side, to jump back to that, again, there's kind of the local, there's what do Michiganders use these fisheries for, how do they benefit from them, but a big part of the economics, right, is Michigan is a big state for out-of-staters coming here. Short of Alaska, we have kind of all the mix other than saltwater, and so when our fisheries start slipping, it's hard to notice, but people make tourism-related decisions based on high quality. They don't go, hey, I want to go over here because I hear it's mediocre. They're only making trips based on really wonderful opportunities. And so there was a really thoughtful question earlier about tourism. What we're going to just see is a slip, right? There's going to be a few less trips, a few people from Indiana deciding not to come up here for a 5-day trip because the last time it wasn't as good as they remember it. So it slips, and to kind of reflect to the question, the economic output numbers, they're relatively stable so far, but those mostly the sources we rely on those is a federal survey that's done every 4 years. Last one was 22, the 26 isn't out yet. So if we've slipped, we won't know until later this year, basically. But it'll be nuanced, right? It's just a slow decay of trip choices based on whether people were really satisfied when they made the trip, or are people talking in media and marketing about how wonderful it is here, or are they talking about a different state now?
Sure.
It's
Well,
nuanced.
I do really appreciate you laying all that out for the committee and for folks that are tuning in as well. I do think it's a modest increase. I just think people need some reassurance that the money is going to be wisely allocated. We obviously want to see a robust fishing industry here in the state of Michigan. We don't want to see it diminish. So many benefits, even not just the tasty fish, but just mental health benefits, just getting out in the outdoors and enjoying nature. And I'm really encouraged by some of the things that you've said. I have a couple of concerns, but I think we can work through them. But again, I really appreciate you guys' time today.
Thank you.
Representative Altman, I'd like to make one point of clarification too. When we talk about funding hatcheries, the bulk of that effort is going to be for inland waters. Our Great Lakes stocking levels are kind of controlled by the level of bait. So we don't anticipate a big increase in Great Lakes stocking. Most of that stocking is going to go for inland walleyes. It's a very popular fish. So the way the bill's structured is you see a big boost on inland waters for people who don't have Great Lakes boats, and then the only one that can run more rods would be Great Lakes trollers on the Great Lakes. We wouldn't increase rod limits on inland waters. That could have an impact to the health of some inland lakes that can't sustain a higher level of harvest, where the Great Lakes fishery is pretty much a put and take fishery. Anglers pay to stock salmon. They're going to swim up river and die. So allowing anglers to catch a few more salmon on the Great Lake is a real benefit of this bill. But for inland anglers, they get that increased walleye, muskie, trout stocking, and so they get a benefit with that. So it's designed to benefit inland anglers and Great Lakes anglers both.
I liked your comment on the objective of fishing, because I've had more than one daydream ruined by fish on, so. Representative Preston.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate your last comments, because you're right. The Great Lakes have been in flux for quite a long time. It's bait fish oriented, and living on the Great Lakes my entire life and fishing on the Great Lakes my entire life, I wonder what, going through the shad, the alewives, the introduction to salmon, the salmon peak, what the baseline is in the Great Lakes. The thing that I just wanted to clarify on is, and I did some research on this prior to this meeting, the assertion that there is greater recruitment with the youth license is just patently false. I've got 4 studies that refute that, and it's quite the contrary. There's an inverse relationship. Youth licenses are a barrier to entry, and there are 4 studies, one of them by the American Sports Fishing Association, that show that it is a barrier and that it does not increase recruitment of youth fishermen. It actually depresses it. So I just wanted to make that known to the committee as well as to you guys, that that is not a fact. And on the senior side, like I said, I'm not a big fan of changing the rules, especially the seniors that are on fixed income halfway through. What we did is what we did in 2014, and we need to live by that. Otherwise, I do support this bill. I believe fisheries, and I'm incredibly thankful that we're going to concentrate on inland fishing, because the Great Lakes have been in flux for such a long time. I truly would like to know what is the Great Lakes baseline, because we've been shoving fish in there and watching our perch, just completely dry up on my end. It's we put in so many teeth, and there's so little bait fish left. It's every year it's a different fishery. I think it's, to some extent, the Great Lakes needs to find a baseline that we can work off of. But thank you for your testimony.
Representative, if I may, I appreciate your comments, and definitely, we can work with you on those concerns. To your point on the perch and stuff, one of the things that we want to do with the funding is the avian control with the cormorants and stuff, and be able to fund those things properly, because, like you said, the teeth, they're not just in the water, they're also in the sky. So that is something we need to look at as well.
Yeah, but when I go walleye fishing, like in my neck of the woods, and when I'm filleting them, I'm finding, I've found bellies full of perch. There's just, in my mind, there's just way too many teeth in the water. Those smaller species are just, they're continually going to struggle when you've got, 22-inch smallies, tons of walleye. There's just a lot of pike, and they love little fish.
Yep.
So
Understood.
Representative McFall.
Thank you, Chair. I may have missed this, but how is the committee or commission, whatever it is, how are they selected?
So the Fisheries Oversight Committee, we have it set up to where the director would pick the chair, and then the chair looks at the Citizens Advisory Committee. So you have, each lake has a Citizens Advisory Committee, and it's just made up of local citizens that come and are involved and interested in in fisheries and issues, and then we would draw them from the advisory committee and make up the actual board, I want to call it, of the committee that can sit there and then give input, because they're obviously Lake Superior, Huron, Michigan, Erie, and such, and also the inland committees will then be able to give that input to fisheries to look at things and see the policies and such. So it's it's just loose. The chair would be somebody like myself that's looking to try and make a difference, and that's how this came about.
So the So the director of the DNR would,
The director of the DNR would pick the chair, and then the chair would go to the different CACs, the Citizen Advisory Committees.
And they'd recommend
and
somebody.
and then you would go there and say, all right, we're looking for somebody that would be willing to put their time in to serve on this committee.
okay, thank you.
Representative Warts?
Yeah, that was kind of my question too. So, and those are volunteers not paid?
Correct, volunteers.
Okay. And then my other question on that, have you thought about including, notice when you talk about projects to be funded, I came from a conservation district, and in my opinion, conservation districts are highly underutilized. And more of funding that's in the department could go directly to conservation districts, and they could be your boots on the ground people with some of this. Have you guys analyzed that or considered how you can connect with local conservation districts?
So I work for a nonprofit that does restoration work too. So clearly that I agree that whenever we can find synergies or cost efficiencies, you still get the same work, same value, but you can find a way to do it for less. You have to work for those, right? You have to find those. I suspect that to be the case. However, we haven't tried to get in front of ourselves. So the Fisheries Oversight Committee, until you granted authority to meet and discuss those opportunities, it's difficult to get there. So do I expect, and is one of the reasons we're working for this, to have that set up so that we can look for those opportunities? Absolutely. But we've tried to stay where we are right now, which is sharing the idea with people like yourselves.
Okay, and with the last question, Representative Hoadley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony today. One, to piggyback off of what Rep. Preston was saying is, I know it's hard to believe, but I'm old enough to remember the transition in Lake Huron and Saginaw Bay going from, salmon and epic smelt runs, right, and buckets filled of perch to now what is arguably probably the best walleye fishery in the world in the Saginaw Bay and Lake Huron. And that's not a problem, because back to the tourism question, it's bringing a lot into those communities along that lake shore. But my question is, and I'm going to hit on your pun here, is the hatchery stamp is a new revenue stream. Well done. I don't know if you realize you did that or not. But the question is, do you have any estimates as to what type of revenue that hatchery stamp's going to bring in on an annual basis?
Ed, if you'd like to answer that, and then I'll piggyback you.
I don't think we have an exact number of the number of Great Lakes anglers, because today we don't have a separate license to identify that. I think our guesstimate on that is about 40% of anglers fish the Great Lakes, so that would probably be about $5 million. But we don't have a firm figure on that. It's something we could look into and try to get for you. In the past, when they had two licenses, a general license, and prior to 2013, you had a separate license to buy for trout and salmon. And since it's all been combined, there's no way to really get a number of exactly how many people fish the Great Lakes for trout and salmon.
And just to piggyback on that, to the Chair Martin's comment about like with pike and that, when we were looking at it, for the walleye and the salmon and just looking in those arenas, we had it projected that it would be between 5 and 6 million, because that's the arena that we're looking at. And we do know that there's been concerns about folks saying, well, why would I need that hatchery stamp for Saginaw Bay and Lake Erie when they're not hatchery supported? But our comment back to that is, well, those were created by hatcheries, and you don't stop paying taxes for your schools when your kids are gone or you don't have children. So, that's why we were looking at it being a revenue stream, because it's definitely something that you're gonna use for inland lakes.
Okay, appreciate the slides and the information. Hopefully that answers some questions for our further comments. And I do believe, when I look back through the notes, because there's just so many, 24,000 pike that I mentioned took 10 years to do that. So it's not an annual basis. So it's like I said, it was a very small.
And I do know this, when we were going through that, we wanted to make sure that we covered everything that was in the hatchery, because if we didn't, it'd be harder to get it in. So we can always take a look at that and see what we need to do to make it right. So willing to work with everyone.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, I wish I could say equal time, but I think they've said 7 to 10 minutes for their presentation. The DNR, Taylor Ritterbusch, and Randy Claremont, the division chief, or do we have the assistant? What do we have here today? now that Taylor's the chief of staff, it's a privilege to have him here.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate to be back here in the seat filling in for Chris Sumrenick today. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, for taking this bill up today. We're very excited to see that the legislature is, taking a look at department funding and understanding the needs that we have, in this case, in Fish Division, but certainly some other discussions that need to go on with some of our other funding sources. Also wanted to say thank you to Rep. VanderWall and all of the stakeholders here that put in a ton of time and effort to bring this forward. In terms of this bill, we are there on basically 90% of it. The one concern that we do have is that 100% going directly to Fish Division. And so part of what I really want to describe to you here is that when money comes in through our license sales that goes into our Game and Fish Fund, and that's a combination of hunting license, fishing licenses, where they don't have, separate reserve funds. And what happens there is there's money that's split out to each of those divisions, Wildlife Division, Fisheries Division, and there are also services that are provided by other divisions around the department that service fisheries or service wildlife, that being our law enforcement division. So when we have our conservation officers out in the field, they're either working on fish enforcement, wildlife enforcement, or both at the same time. So there's a little bit of a gray area there. We also have our licensing system that's run through our marketing and operations division. So that's where you actually can go to the website, go to one of our customer service centers. That's the interface where you purchase your license from to print the license stock. Again, that's a shared expense between Fish Division and Wildlife Division. And then the third that I would touch on would be how we, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second.
In terms of costs?
Yeah.
Marketing outreach, licensing, law enforcement.
Anyway, we can move on from that. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that there are basically shared expenses that we have between those two divisions, and that's where they go into the same pot. And without this bill taking consideration of what's happening on the wildlife side, we're unsure of what the overall financials look like for the department. And so that's where we would really like to get into that discussion about how do we fill that gap between both Fish and Wildlife Division, because there are certainly things, very analogous on the wildlife side of things that we would really like to get sorted out. So like I said, we're there on about 90% of this. It's just the kind of uncertainty that comes along with how do we fill in the rest of the services that are provided. Oh, I remember the third one. It's the work that we do in our with the legal team, right? Whether that's we're in negotiating on the inland consent decree, the decrees with tribes. Those are things that we continue to have to work on that. Fish Division, Wildlife Division, they rely on those services from some of the other staff that we have. So that's where it gets a little bit gray. And there are certainly things that we see coming from Wildlife Division that can support fisheries, the work that we do on wetlands that provides good, clean, cold water into our streams and lakes. And so there's some things that overlap there. So with that, I'll pass it over to Randy to, talk about the fish side of things.
Yeah, appreciate that, Taylor, and I very much appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I only have 10 pages of comments. I'm kidding. Chair Martin, I certainly respect you and the committee's time, so I'm going to actually try to paraphrase a lot of my comments, but more specifically address some of the questions that have been asked, or maybe some that you want to ask me as Fisheries Chief of Michigan. Today, though, would not be possible without recognizing the bill's sponsor, Rep. VanderWall, as well as fishery stakeholders Mark Williams, Ed Blissick, Brian Burrows, and the hundreds of other representatives and stakeholders that have signed on to the bill and have also been supportive of doing something for Michigan fisheries. I have to preface my comments by saying, what we're really dealing with is the North American model of conservation. If you're not familiar, the North American model is a unique science-based system that's built on core principles. And those principles are that the fish and wildlife are held in public trust and that they provide hunting and fishing opportunities for all citizens, ensuring sustainable populations and opportunities for all future generations. This model, however, is funded entirely by hunters and anglers, either directly through license sales or indirectly through the federal excise tax, creating a user pay but all of the public benefits system for us as an agency. What do you do when the user pay system doesn't work, when it's failing? And how do we move forward with this? We as an agency have the responsibility to ring the alarm bell, but it's really the stakeholders, the users, the anglers in this case, that have brought the creative solutions to the table. And as I think if you heard today, they're open to improving those suggestions, coming up with the best solutions possible. Not only have they taken up this responsibility, but they've demanded from me accountability, transparency, and they want ownership in how a fishing license is used in Michigan. And I think that is something that I very much appreciate. These fishery stakeholders didn't just stop at accountability. They've worked over the last year and a half to make proposals and improvements to our license structure for the benefit of the fishery. I would frame their overall theme as the revenue of a fishing license provides a maximum benefit to the fishery. And I think we all can agree on that. That license fees both reflect the value of the fishery as well as providing the necessary funding over time. And that 3, the stakeholders have a voice in addressing the legacy of the fishery in the future. No matter what happens to 5093, I hope those core principles live on and drive a solution in the future. I've heard a lot of questions about the value of the fishery and what it is for Michigan. To me, it's what makes Michigan, Michigan is our fisheries. The $26 license, as was referenced, if you wanted all species licensed in 1997, you paid the same amount. But inflationary costs have skyrocketed. Yes, we have retained our 1.1 to 1.2 million anglers, but the revenue shortfalls are from inflationary costs. The question was about the relative comparison. If you look at all the Midwestern states, Michigan is the second lowest fishing license for an annual resident and the lowest for a 24-hour license. Indiana has a higher license structure, and they have a sliver of the Great Lakes. We have more freshwater than any state in the nation, with 20% of the Great Lakes, 3,300 miles shoreline, 11,000 inland lakes, 52,000 miles of streams. It was referenced what a biologist has to do if you come to work with me, for me as fisheries chief. I'm going to ask you to manage over 900 lakes, thousands of miles of stream. Be responsive to when everyone comes out in the spring and they say dead fish, they call us and say, what's happened? I can send a biologist to survey a lake once every 90 years. So imagine when I tell a stakeholder, we'll come and visit your lake to see what's wrong in 90 years. That's how low our staffing level is. We've also decreased our fish stocking by half. We used to rear over 40 million fish. Now we rear 20 million. To get at Rep. Martin's point, yes, we used to raise not only 20 more million fish, but a variety of different species. Our pike and muskie program is almost an embarrassment in terms of what we could do for fishing opportunities. Muskie in particular, they are a prize game fish. And I always say, out of our 11,000 inland lakes, we stock 22,000 muskie. So imagine that. Let's hope that if we stocked 2 muskie per lake in Michigan, one's a male and one's a female, so that we can get sustainable fisheries. We are not meeting the mark in terms of fish production. When we stock fish in a lake, it has been shown that the public perception of the quality of that lake, from water quality to recreational fishing opportunities, goes up, whether we put 1 fish in there or 100,000. I really appreciated Rep. Preston's critical thoughts on both the youth license as well as some of the other provisions in the bill. So I'd like to address that really quickly. The baseline for the Great Lakes is forever changing. With every new invasive species, with every challenge, with every threat, it's like reshuffling the deck. What are you going to get? The only way we've been able to provide sustainable fishing opportunities in Michigan is to be able to assess the Great Lakes. We have some of the most dedicated staff to try to figure out what's happening with invasive species, what's happening with the fisheries. We are losing that ability, which means we're going to be driving blind. We're not going to be able to provide a baseline. Our stocking levels won't be made in conjunction with what the prey base can support if we don't continue to be able to survey the Great Lakes and really understand them. The youth voluntary license that was dropped in the last license package in 2014 that was brought back by anglers, by stakeholders as a voluntary license, one of the data points has been when a youth gets that license, that voluntary $2 license, they tend to be lifelong anglers. So that's the one data point in Michigan that we have. I agree with the concern that we do not want a license that will, both in terms of fee or in structure, that'll reduce the angler participation in Michigan. I have counties where over a third of the county is participating in fishing. Let that sink in for a second. So I'll just conclude by saying that both the license fee as well as the structure should be done in a way that's sustainable, both in terms of getting the resources of the fishery, but also promoting fishing in Michigan because it is so important to us as a state. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
That's good. We'll get some quick questions in. Representative Altman, if we can be real brief, I have several things to take care of here.
I'll be very quick. I know we're running short on time. Thank you, Chair. Thank you guys for coming in to testify. Two really quick questions. Number one, starting with administrative overhead. What percentage of fisheries funding currently goes to administrative versus on the water work like stocking, hatcheries, habitat access, things like that?
Yeah, so the amount of fishing license that's appropriated back to us as a division is basically split in thirds. A third of it's for fish stocking, a third of it's for surveys and management in support of that stocking, and the rest is for other administrative support systems, legal. You know, one of the things I tell people a lot is, we have to provide services for assessing natural resource damage assessments, managing the commercial fishery, managing other things. And because our primary funding source is licenses, we have to use licenses to be able to do that.
Understood. Next question, just really quickly. This is going back to 2014 when we restructured the licensing, jacked it up a little bit, and introduced I think it was the senior license or one of those licenses. But during that time, you guys, the legislature put in a $1 wildlife surcharge for, I don't know, I think it was like some sort of media campaign.
That's correct.
Yeah, I mean, what exactly are we funding with that, and are we seeing some meaningful results from that campaign?
Yeah, so it funds what's called the Wildlife Council, and the Wildlife Council is meant to bring awareness and support for what was a declining hunter and angler base. And so it's really been focused on messaging the outdoors. And, Taylor, I don't know if you want to speak to the benefits of that, but again, from a fisheries standpoint in Michigan, we haven't lost the anglers. We don't see the same declines that on the hunting side.
Yeah, I would just add
And
that
we can keep it to the bill because we are so short on time.
I'll leave it at that.
And good. That's fine. Sorry about the Representative Alton. We can figure it out after. Follow up outside the bill. Representative Warch, you had something?
Yeah, my question is just, how are you going to ensure that these funds are not weaponized? And the reason I'm asking that is I'm from Branch County. In 2022, the department tried to reclassify the Prairie River from a warm stream to a cold stream because of trout that hadn't been assessed or identified since 2016. And this would have affected 25,000 acres of prime farm ground in my district. This is still up for debate currently, but the department didn't take any recommendations from local landowners. And so to me, I have high concerns. I love the idea of fishing, but I do not love the idea of giving you guys more money to weaponize against local landowners.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, and I definitely would love to have a side conversation. I will just say this. When the cold water and really the groundwater management in Michigan began, there was a lot of unknowns. How much groundwater do we have? How much is coming from the Great Lakes? How much can we withdraw before we see impacts on things like our valuable cold water resources? The Prairie Creek example is one where the rules and the policies and the management behind it hadn't really caught up with all the users. So I look at that as the solutions that will go forward to address that once we get the temperature data will much better balance the needs of both agriculture but also managing inland trout streams. So I can't say that I was there for when that developed, but I will say we're doing a much better job, and I don't see that situation arising in the future. But I very much appreciate your concern. I can provide more detail on what we've been working on in that regard offline.
I think that's critical, and for me to be able to support this bill in any way, I would need insurance from the department that you're not going to use this to weaponize against landowners.
Yep.
All right, now, thank you very much. Lots of information. I have to apologize to our members or our visitors waiting on Zoom. I'm hoping that your questions or your presentations on Zoom have been presented here by all the parties interested, and that you're in support. So if you have specific things you'd like to present from the Zoom that we can't get to, please put them in an email. We'll put them in the record on the minutes. And that'd be from Mark Johnson, Director of Keweenaw Calumet Sportsman's Club, Travis White, Charter Captain, Keweenaw Charter Fishing. Appreciate you taking your time and listening to all this. And if all this stuff is in agreement with what we're going to testify to, just throw that in an email and we'll put it in the record. In addition, people that were wishing to speak, we just don't have time for, but they do support the bill. Hopefully all these questions have been answered and supported, and they were just going to support what has already been presented. Duke LeBon from Michigan Muskie Alliance. Can't read all these names. Carl Berghoff. Okay. Michigan Charter Boat Association. Michael Vane from the Aranet County Walleye Club. Dennis Aid from Michigan Steelhead and Salmon Fisheries. We got Taylor did this already. Tom, is it Andrus from the Muskegon Charter Boat Association? Ed Beckley. Just representing yourself. So I appreciate you taking your time to come all the way here for this in an hour and a half with the length of presentations, the depth of a meeting on this, the depth of changing fee structure is so detailed that hopefully your questions and your thoughts were mirrored here in the testimony. Again, if you have something specific you'd want in the record, feel free to send an email and we'll put it in the minutes. And not wishing to speak in support of the bill was John Johns from Blue Water Sports Fishing. So I appreciate everything. Appreciate the time, the information, whatever wrinkles need to be addressed. We'll get to that. Okay. Representative Johnson moves to excuse absent members. There being no objection, motion prevailed by unanimous consent. And we do plan a meeting next week on January 28th. There being no further business come for the committee will stand adjourned.